I heard my daughter's breath catch before I even finished processing what my dad said. $40,000 a year. That is what I had been spending to keep them happy. So I smiled, said have fun, and killed the credit card they used like a family utility. They found out at the airport when every single swipe declined. My mom screamed from the international terminal while I was already boarding a flight someplace warm with my kids. My name is Emery Hernandez. And as I stood under the sterile fluorescent hum of Terminal 4, I felt lighter than I had in 20 years. I am 39 years old, and for the last decade, I have been the invisible load-bearing beam of a house that was never designed to shelter me. It was 4:15 in the morning. The airport was in that strange, suspended state between sleep and the manic energy of the morning rush. The air smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. My 3 children were lined up like sleepy ducklings in front of me. Leo, my oldest at 10, was rubbing sleep from his eyes. Maya, who is 7, was clutching her stuffed rabbit by the ears, and Sam, my 4-year-old, was sitting on his small suitcase, spinning in slow, dizzy circles. The silence of the terminal should have been peaceful. It would have been, if not for the device burning a hole in the pocket of my trench coat. My phone was not just ringing, it was having a seizure. I did not need to look at the screen to know who it was, but I looked anyway. The names flashed in a rapid-fire sequence that made my stomach churn with a phantom guilt I was rapidly learning to suppress. Mom, Dad, Brielle, Dustin, Mom, Brielle. It was a digital assault, a coordinated attack. The phone vibrated so hard against my thigh it felt like a second heartbeat. One that was erratic and panicked. Outside, past the floor-to-ceiling glass windows, the tarmac was dark and swept by rain. A storm was brewing out there in the Midwest darkness, but the real hurricane was currently raging 3 terminals away in the International Departures Hall. I reached down and silenced the ringer. I did not turn the phone off. Not yet. I wanted to see it. I needed to witness the panic. It was the first time in my life I had held the remote control to their chaos, and I found I had a taste for it. I knelt in front of Sam. His shoelace was dragging on the carpet. "Hold still, buddy," I said. My voice was steady. It sounded like the voice of a woman who was going on a business trip, not a woman who had just detonated a nuclear bomb in the center of her family dynamic. I tied the lace into a double knot. Firm, secure, I adjusted his collar. Then I pulled 3 pairs of noise-canceling headphones out of my carry-on. I placed them over my children's ears, one by one. I turned on their tablets and synced the audio. The sounds of the airport, the distant announcements, the rolling wheels, the frantic buzzing of my phone were instantly replaced by the cheerful, insulated sounds of cartoons and upbeat pop music. They were safe. They were in a bubble. I stood up and checked the board. Our flight was boarding in 10 minutes. The phone buzzed again. This time, it was a notification from my bank app, then another, then 3 more in rapid succession. Transaction declined. Transaction declined. Transaction declined. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. For a long time, I had told myself it was normal. That is what families do. They help each other. But when I ran the numbers last week, sitting alone in my kitchen with a calculator and a bottle of wine, the math stopped looking like help and started looking like embezzlement. $40,000 a year. That is what I had been spending. $40,000. That is a down payment on a house. That is a college fund. That is a luxury car. That is the price I paid annually to keep the peace. I paid for the flights. I paid for the upgrades. I paid for the group dinners where I was sat at the end of the table near the kitchen door. I paid for the family memories that my children were barely allowed to be a part of. I was not a daughter. I was a utility. I was the electricity company and the water department. You do not thank the electricity company when the lights turn on. You only scream at them when the power goes out. And, oh, the power had just gone out. I swiped the screen to unlock it. There was a voicemail from 2 minutes ago. It was from Sharon, my mother. I lifted the phone to my ear, not to speak, but to listen. I needed to hear it. I needed the confirmation that I wasn't crazy, that they really were exactly who I suspected they were. The background noise on the recording was deafening. I could hear the echo of the international terminal. I could hear the sharp, polite voice of an airline attendant trying to maintain order. And over it all, I heard my mother. "Emery!" Her voice was a shriek that distorted the microphone. "Emery, pick up the phone. The card is not working. The lady says it is declined. Do you hear me? Declined. There is a line of people behind us, and your father is humiliated. Fix this. Call the bank right now and fix this. We are going to miss the lounge access if you do not." The message cut off. The time limit must have run out, or maybe she had thrown the phone. I looked at the timestamp. They were standing at the priority check-in desk. They were likely wearing the matching travel outfits Brielle had picked out, the ones she forgot to send me the link for. They were standing there with their passports in hand, waiting for the magic card to smooth the way, just like it always did. But the magic was gone. Another notification popped up on my screen. It was a security alert from the credit card issuer. Attempted charge international VIP lounge, plus priority seat upgrades. Amount $2,400. Status declined. A small, cold smile touched my lips. I had predicted this. I knew them better than they knew themselves. They had the audacity, even after everything that was said at dinner, even after the way they looked at my children as if they were luggage that exceeded the weight limit. They still tried to upgrade their seats. They didn't just want a free ride. They wanted the premium package. They wanted to sip champagne and stretch their legs in first class while using the card of the daughter they told to stay behind. It was breathtaking. Really. The entitlement was so pure it was almost artistic. "Mom." I looked down. Leo had lifted one ear cup of his headphones. He was looking at me with those wide, perceptive eyes that saw too much. He had heard the buzzing. He had seen the tension in my jaw before I forced it to relax. He knew the rhythm of my family better than any 10-year-old should. He knew that a phone call from Grandma usually meant Mom would be sad for the rest of the day. "Are we in trouble?" he asked. His voice was small. He looked terrified that we were doing something wrong, that we were breaking the rules. And we were breaking the biggest rule of the Hernandez family: Emery pays. And Emery stays quiet. I looked at him. I looked at Maya and Sam. They were dressed in comfortable clothes, ready for an adventure that was actually designed for them. No stiff dinners, no being told to hush, no being compared to Dustin's perfect, quiet, athletic children. I reached out and smoothed Leo's hair. My hand was not shaking. "No, baby," I said, and my voice was clear and strong. "We are not in trouble." I looked up at the gate agent. She was calling our group. Zone 3. "We are finally free," I whispered. I stood up and grabbed the handle of my suitcase. "Okay, team," I said, raising my voice to be heard over the airport din. "Headphones on. Let's go." As we walked toward the gate, the phone buzzed one final time. A text from Brielle. Probably something nasty. Probably something about how I was selfish. How I was ruining everything. How could I do this to the family? I did not read it. I walked up to the gate agent, a kind-looking woman with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. She smiled at the kids. "Boarding passes?" she asked. I held out my phone with the QR codes displayed. My thumb hovered over the side button. "Here you go," I said. "We're ready." The machine beeped. Green light. Valid. As the agent waved us through to the jet bridge. I pressed the power button on the side of my phone. I held it down. The screen went dark. The buzzing stopped. The frantic, screaming, demanding world of my parents and my siblings was silenced with a single click. It felt like closing the heavy steel door of a vault. I followed my children down the tunnel. The air grew cooler as we got closer to the plane. I took a deep breath, inhaling the smell of jet fuel and freedom. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't worrying about whether my dad had enough legroom, or if my mom didn't like her meal, or if Brielle was offended by the hotel view. I was only thinking about the sun. I was thinking about the ocean. I was thinking about the fact that $40,000 was going to stay in my bank account this year, or better yet, be spent on the 3 little humans walking in front of me. But as we stepped onto the plane, the ghost of the anger flickered back. It wasn't regret. It was the memory of the catalyst, the moment the blindfold had been ripped off. It wasn't the money that hurt the most. It wasn't even the years of being taken for granted. It was the specific, calculated cruelty of how they did it this time. My mind drifted back, away from the airport, away from the victory of the declined credit card. It went back to Sunday night, the smell of roast chicken and expensive beeswax candles, the heavy cardstock of the envelopes. It started with a candlelit dinner and a stack of envelopes that were never meant for my kids. The drive to my parents' house in Maple Glen always felt like traveling back in time. And not in a nostalgic, warm, fuzzy way. It was more like regressing into a version of myself that was 12 years old, awkward, and desperately seeking approval that was priced just slightly higher than I could afford. It was a Sunday in early spring. The Ohio sky was a flat, non-committal gray, the kind that threatens rain but never actually delivers, just hanging there like a damp wool blanket. When we pulled into the driveway, the house looked perfect. It always did. My father, Frank, obsessed over the lawn with the same intensity other men apply to fantasy football or vintage cars. The grass was a lush, chemically enhanced green that looked startling against the muddy thaw of the neighbors' yards. The shutters were freshly painted a crisp black. To an outsider, this was the American dream. Brick and mortar edition. Inside, the air smelled of roasted garlic, rosemary, and the heavy, floral scent of my mother's expensive potpourri. It was the smell of performative domesticity. "Shoes off," Sharon called out from the kitchen before we had even fully crossed the threshold. I just had the carpets shampooed. I knelt down to help Sam with his sneakers. My husband, Gavin, gave me a look over the top of his head. It was a micro-expression, a tightening of the corners of his eyes that said, "Here we go." Gavin had seen the cracks in the foundation of my family long before I allowed myself to acknowledge them. He tolerated these dinners for my sake, treating them like a bomb disposal technician treating a live wire, careful, quiet, and ready to shield me if things blew up. We walked into the dining room, and I immediately knew something was off. Usually, Sunday dinner was a casual affair. Paper napkins, the everyday plates, the news playing softly on the television in the other room. But today, the dining room table was set like we were expecting royalty. The good china, the ones with the gold rim that we were forbidden to touch growing up, was laid out. The heavy crystal wine glasses were sparkling under the chandelier light. And there were candles, tall, ivory tapers burning in the silver holders my mother usually kept locked in the china cabinet. "What is the occasion?" I asked, guiding the kids to their usual spots on the side of the table, where the sunlight didn't quite reach. Brielle was already there, sitting across from where I would be. My younger sister looked like she had just stepped out of a catalog for upscale athleisure wear. Her hair was blown out in perfect waves. Her makeup was flawless, and her phone was already in her hand. She was holding it vertically. The camera lens pointed at the table setup, panning slowly to capture the aesthetic. "Just wait," Brielle said, offering me a tight, dimpled smile that didn't reach her eyes. Mom and Dad have an announcement. Dustin, my older brother, walked in from the patio with his wife, Kara. They looked like a matching set of salt and pepper shakers, sturdy, reliable, and slightly bland. Dustin gave me a nod that was more of a dismissal than a greeting and sat down at the right hand of my father's chair. My mother, Sharon, bustled in with the roast. She was humming. That was the second red flag. Sharon only hummed when she had an audience. She placed the platter in the center of the table and clapped her hands together. "Everyone sit, sit," she urged. "Frank, honey, pour the wine." My father stood at the head of the table. He was a man who took up space, not because he was particularly large, but because he assumed the air in the room belonged to him. He picked up the bottle of Cabernet, a bottle I recognized because I had bought a case of it for his birthday 3 months ago, and began to fill the glasses. I watched him. I felt a familiar tug in my chest, that pathetic little hope that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. Maybe they were celebrating a milestone. Maybe they just wanted to have a nice dinner. The kids were restless. Sam was kicking his legs under the table, and Leo was eyeing the candles nervously, knowing that an open flame and his little brother were a dangerous combination. "All right, everyone," Frank said, tapping his knife against his wine glass. The sharp ding, ding, ding cut through the murmur of conversation. Brielle immediately adjusted her posture. She lifted her phone higher, framing the shot. I saw the red recording dot blinking on her screen. She was live streaming, or at least recording for a story. "We have been planning this for a while," Frank began, his chest puffing out slightly. He looked around the table, making eye contact with Dustin, then Brielle, then me. His gaze lingered on me for a fraction of a second less than the others. "Your mother and I have been thinking about the legacy we want to create, the memories." Sharon reached out and squeezed his hand. Beaming, she looked like a woman who had just won a lottery she didn't buy a ticket for. "We decided," Frank announced, his voice booming with generosity, "that it is time for the big one. We are taking the family to Europe." For a second, the room erupted. "Europe," shouted my niece, Dustin's daughter. "No way," Brielle squealed, acting surprised even though her reaction was too perfectly timed. Too camera-ready. My heart leaped. Europe. We had talked about this vaguely for years. I had sent them links to villas in Tuscany and flats in London. I had forwarded flight deals. I looked at Leo, whose face had lit up. He was obsessed with knights and castles. This was his dream. I opened my mouth to say something, to ask when we were going, but Frank held up a hand. The room went quiet. He turned his body slightly, angling himself toward me. It wasn't a warm turn. It was the way a judge turns to a defendant. "Now, Emery," he said, his tone shifting from celebratory to practical. "We need to be realistic about the logistics." My smile faltered. "Logistics?" "We are taking the family," Frank repeated, and then he delivered the blow with the casual precision of a butcher severing a joint. "Without you and your kids, you will just slow us down." The silence that followed was absolute. It wasn't a quiet silence. It was a sucking chest wound of a silence. It was the sound of all the oxygen being pulled out of the room. I felt the blood drain from my face. I heard a small, sharp intake of breath from my side. It was Leo. He had heard it. He had understood it. "You will just slow us down." "Excuse me," I whispered. My voice sounded thin, reedy, like it belonged to a ghost. Sharon didn't look at me. She reached under the table and pulled out a stack of envelopes. They were thick, navy blue cardstock with gold foil lettering. They looked expensive. They looked official. She stood up and began to pass them out. "This is for you, Dustin," she said, sliding a heavy envelope to my brother. He opened it immediately. Inside was a leather passport holder embossed with his initials and a thick, bound itinerary. "And for Kara, and the kids," Sharon continued, handing out smaller envelopes to Dustin's family. "And for my baby," she cooed, sliding one to Brielle. Brielle didn't put her phone down. She filmed her own hand reaching out to take the envelope, capturing the gift for her followers. Then Sharon sat back down. There were no envelopes for us. The tablecloth in front of me was stark white and empty. My children sat with their hands in their laps, watching their cousins tear open the fancy paper. Sam, my 4-year-old, looked at me with confusion. He didn't understand the geography of Europe, but he understood the geography of this table. He understood that everyone else had something to open, and he did not. I looked at Frank. He was calmly cutting into his roast beef, as if he hadn't just amputated a limb of his family tree. "Dad," I said, and I hated how steady my voice was. I hated that I didn't flip the table. "What do you mean? We would slow you down." Frank chewed slowly. He swallowed. He took a sip of the wine I bought him. "Emery, let us be honest," he said, using his reasonable man voice. "Traveling with 3 kids is a nightmare, especially yours. Sam is loud, Leo has his sensitivities, and Maya needs constant attention. We want to relax. We want to do wine tastings and museum tours. We cannot do that if we are dragging a daycare center behind us. We are going to Italy and France," Brielle chimed in. not looking up from her phone. She was typing a caption. "We are doing the Amalfi Coast. It is not really kid-friendly. You know." "But Dustin is bringing his kids," I pointed out. My voice was rising. "Just a fraction." Dustin looked up, annoyed. "My kids are older. They know how to behave in restaurants. It is not personal. Emery, your kids are a lot. The words hung in the air like smoke. My children were a lot. I looked at Leo. He was staring at his plate, his ears burning red. He was 10. He wasn't stupid. He knew exactly what sensitivities meant. It meant his anxiety. It meant the fact that he needed a quiet moment sometimes. It meant he wasn't the perfect, preppy country club accessory my father wanted his grandsons to be. "So," I said, my hands gripping the edge of the table so hard my knuckles turned white, "you are going to Europe, the whole family, except us. We will send you postcards," Sharon said brightly, as if that solved everything. "And we thought, since you won't be spending money on the trip, maybe you could watch the dog while we are gone. Buster gets so anxious at the kennel." I stared at her. The audacity was so immense it was almost physical. It had weight. It had mass. They weren't just excluding me. They were dismissing me. And then, the realization hit me. It wasn't a wave. It was a tsunami. The itinerary, the flights, the hotels, the VIP experiences. Brielle was undoubtedly already hashtagging. "Who paid for this?" I asked. The room went quiet again, but this time, it was a different kind of silence. It was the shifting, uncomfortable silence of people who know they are guilty but don't think they should be caught. Frank cleared his throat. "We used the family travel fund, and the points. The family travel fund. The fund that was linked to the platinum credit card in my name. The card I had given them access to 5 years ago for emergencies and household repairs, which had slowly morphed into groceries, then Christmas gifts, and now, apparently, a 5-star tour of the Mediterranean." I looked at the stack of envelopes on the table. The navy blue paper alone probably cost more than my son's new sneakers. Brielle laughed nervously. "Dad, don't say it like that," she said, finally addressing the exclusion. But her tone was light, teasing. "You make it sound so mean. Seriously, you would hate it. Too much walking. We are doing you a favor." She didn't offer to share her ticket. She didn't suggest I come alone. She just reframed my rejection as a gift. I looked at Gavin. His face was a mask of stone. He was waiting for my signal. One look from me, and he would have burned the house down. But I didn't look at him. I looked at my mother, who was beaming at the itinerary in her hand. I looked at my father, who was pouring himself more wine. I looked at my brother, who was already showing his wife pictures of the hotel pool on his phone. They didn't see me. They didn't see my children. To them, I wasn't a person. I was an ATM with a pulse. I was the resource they mined to fund the lifestyle they felt they deserved. They wanted the Europe trip, but they didn't want the burden of the person who made it possible. They wanted the photo op, and my children, my beautiful, messy, real children ruined the aesthetic. I took a deep breath. The smell of the roast beef was suddenly nauseating. I could scream. I could cry. I could demand they hand over the cards right now. I could make a scene that would ruin Brielle's perfect video. But as I looked at Leo's humiliated face, I realized that screaming would only validate them. If I screamed, I was the crazy daughter. I was the dramatic one. I was the one who couldn't take a joke. If I screamed, they won. So I did the one thing they didn't expect. I picked up my fork, I stabbed a potato, and I forced a smile onto my face that was as sharp and cold as a razor blade. "Wow," I said. "Okay." Frank let out a long exhale. His shoulders dropping, he smiled. A genuine, relieved smile. He thought he had done it. He thought he had managed the employee. He thought I had accepted the terms of the contract they play, and I stay out of the frame. "Good," Frank said. "I knew you would be reasonable. Pass the gravy. Sharon?" I watched the gravy boat move down the table. I watched them eat. I watched Brielle take a selfie with her passport cover. I didn't eat a single bite. My mind was already leaving the room. It was already logging into the banking app. It was already calculating dates and processing times. They thought the announcement was the end of the conversation. They didn't realize that by cutting me out of the trip, they had accidentally cut themselves out of the bankroll. They announced their status. They announced their hierarchy. But under the table, with my phone resting on my knee, I was about to announce my resignation. To understand why I didn't flip the table at my parents' house. You have to understand who I am when I'm not being their daughter. I live in Cedar Ridge, a quiet, leafy suburb of Columbus that is exactly 20 minutes away from my office and 30 minutes away from my parents. I chose the location for the school district, but subconsciously, I think I chose it for the distance. Close enough to be dutiful, far enough to breathe. I work as the Senior Operations Manager at Harborstone Logistics Group. My job is literally to manage chaos. I move shipping containers across oceans. I negotiate with trucking unions. I stare at spreadsheets that track global supply chains, where a single delay in Singapore can shut down a factory in Detroit. I am good at it. I am disciplined. I am the woman who wears navy blue blazers and always has a backup plan for the backup plan. I make a very comfortable salary, low six figures, but you would never know it by looking at my car or my closet. I drive a 4-year-old SUV with a dent in the bumper from a grocery cart. My clothes are practical. I fund my 401k. I save for my kids' college. I am the responsible one, and in the economy of the Hernandez family, competence is a tax bracket. My husband, Gavin, is a landscape architect. He is the quiet to my noise. He is a man who can look at a patch of dirt and see a garden, and he can look at my family and see the weeds choking out the flowers. He doesn't say much, but when he does, it usually cuts right to the bone, for years. Gavin watched me write the checks. He watched me swipe the card. He watched me swallow the insults. It is just temporary, I used to tell him, lying to myself more than to him, but it was never temporary. The card, the Platinum Rewards credit card, that became the central nervous system of my family's dysfunction, did not start as a blank check. It started 5 years ago with a panic attack in my father's kitchen. Frank had called me, his voice tight and breathless. There was a glitch with his pension payout. He said, the state system had migrated to a new server, and his checks were frozen for 60 days. He was cash poor. He was worried about the mortgage. He was worried about maintaining appearances. Just until the system clears, Emery, he had said, looking at the floor, acting the part of the humbled patriarch perfectly. I would ask Dustin, but you know he is expanding his business right now, and Brielle, well, she is just getting started. So I did what the good daughter does. I added Frank and Sharon as authorized users on my account. I handed them a piece of plastic with their names embossed on it and told them it was for groceries and emergencies. The pension issue was resolved in 3 weeks. The card was never returned. At first, the charges were small: a tank of gas, a prescription pickup at CVS, things that felt petty to ask for reimbursement for. I would see a charge for $50 at the grocery store and think, it is fine. They fed me for 18 years. Then came the kitchen. Sharon had been complaining about her cabinets for a decade. One afternoon, I got a notification on my phone, Home Depot. $3,000. I called her, my heart hammering. Mom, did you buy new appliances? Oh, honey, the stove just died, she exclaimed, her voice thick with manufactured distress. Right in the middle of making Frank's lunch. We had to replace it, and since we were there, the man said we could get a deal if we did the dishwasher too. I knew you would want us to be safe. Gas leaks are so dangerous. I let it slide. I told myself it was safety. I told myself I was helping. But then the slide turned into an avalanche. It became a verbal tick in the family. Put it on your card, honey. Dustin would have a temporary cash flow issue with his business and need to book a flight for a conference. Put it on Emery's card. I will Venmo her. The Venmo never came, or if it did, it was for half the amount, with a note saying, catch you on the next one. Brielle would forget her wallet at brunch. Put it on Emery's card. They paid me back. Not with money, but with the assumption that my money was community property. When I would gently bring up the balance, Frank would wave a hand and say, "We will deduct it from your inheritance one day." Or Sharon would look wounded and say, "After all we sacrificed to put you through college." They weaponized their past basic parenting to justify their present financial predation. I started keeping a mental tally. It became an obsession. I would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, doing the math. $400 for Brielle's influencer photography course. $600 for a weekend getaway. Frank and Sharon took to Amish country, $200 for a dinner Dustin hosted for his clients, which he somehow charged to the card because he had the number saved in his phone browser. It wasn't just the big things. It was the slow, steady drip of entitlement. It was the Uber rides, the Amazon Prime subscriptions, the Netflix accounts, the dry cleaning, the premium cable package so Frank could watch out-of-market sports games. I was bleeding out, $20 at a time, and they were handing me Band-Aids made of guilt. But if the money was the weapon, the exclusion of my children was the wound. That was the part I tried to hide from Gavin. I could justify the money. I made good money. I could absorb the financial hit. What I could not absorb, what I could not explain away, was the way my children were treated like second-class citizens in a kingdom I was funding. It was subtle. If you weren't looking for it, you might miss it. But I was looking. It was the Grandkids Day photo Sharon posted on Facebook last year. She had taken Dustin's 3 kids and Brielle's newborn to the zoo. The caption read, "My whole world in one frame." So blessed to be a Nana. My children were at school that day. They weren't invited. When I asked Sharon about it, she brushed it off. "Oh, it was a last-minute thing. Emery, Leo is so sensitive to crowds. I didn't want to overwhelm him." She used my son's anxiety as a shield for her favoritism. It was the Christmas pajamas, every year. Sharon did a big production of matching pajamas for Christmas morning, 2 years ago. She handed out the boxes. Dustin's kids got perfectly fitted, high-end flannel sets with their names embroidered on the pockets. When she got to my kids, she handed me 3 generic bags from a discount store. They were out of the matching ones in their sizes, she said with a shrug. "But these are cute. They are red. Close enough." Leo had looked at his cousins, all looking like a catalog ad, and then looked down at his plain, oversized t-shirt. He didn't say anything. He just went to the corner and played with his Lego. It was the way they talked about them. Dustin's son made the varsity soccer team, and Frank toasted him for 10 minutes at Thanksgiving, calling him a champion and a leader. When I mentioned that Maya had won the regional spelling bee, a huge achievement, Frank nodded and said, "That is cute. Good for her. Cute. My children's achievements were cute. Dustin's children's achievements were legacy." Gavin saw it all. He was the one who held me when I cried in the bathroom after that Christmas party. He was the one who told me the truth I was too cowardly to accept. "Emery," he had said, his voice low and hard, "they don't love you. They love the convenience of you. You are the path of least resistance. You are the wallet that doesn't talk back." "That is not true," I had argued, wiping my eyes. "They are just old-fashioned. They rely on me." "They rely on you like a parasite relies on a host," Gavin said. It was the harshest thing he had ever said to me. "And the worst part is, you are letting them teach our kids that this is what love looks like. You are teaching Leo that he has to buy his way into the room." I had walked away from him that night. I was angry. I was defensive. I told myself he didn't understand the complexity of family loyalty. But sitting at that dining table on Sunday night, watching Brielle film her passport cover, listening to Frank casually announce that I was paying for a European vacation I wasn't allowed to attend, the wall of denial finally crumbled. The envelopes on the table were not just travel documents. They were receipts. They were physical proof of the transaction. Frank had said, "Without you and your kids, you will just slow us down." He didn't mean we walked too slowly. He didn't mean we packed too much. He meant that my children with their needs, their feelings, their lack of polished perfection were an inconvenience to the fantasy life he wanted to live. He wanted the luxury that my money provided, but he didn't want the reality of the family that came with it. He wanted the champagne, but he didn't want the headache. I looked at Leo across the table. He was pushing peas around his plate. He looked so small. He looked resigned. He looked like he had already learned the lesson I was desperately trying to unteach him, that he was less than, that he was optional, that he was the other. That was the moment the switch flipped. It wasn't the $40,000. I would have paid $40,000 to keep my parents happy if they had just once looked at my son the way they looked at Dustin's. I would have driven the car into the ground and worn thrift store clothes for the rest of my life if it meant my daughter felt like she belonged at that table. But they took the money, and they still left my children out in the cold. I realized then that I wasn't angry because I was excluded. I was a grown woman. I didn't need a trip to Italy to validate my existence. I could book my own trip. I was angry because I had been complicit. I had taught my children to sit still. I had taught them to say thank you for the scraps. I had taught them that Grandma's love was conditional and Grandpa's attention was a scarce resource they had to compete for. I had been paying a subscription fee to a club that refused to let my children in the front door. Frank was still talking about the itinerary. "We are thinking of a private boat tour in Capri," he said, looking at Dustin. "Maybe do some snorkeling." "That sounds expensive." "Dad," Dustin said. But he was grinning. He knew he wasn't paying for it. "Oh, we have the points," Frank said, waving his hand dismissively. "And the miles. My points, my miles, my late nights at the office, my missed dinners with Gavin, my stress ulcers." I looked at the candle flickering in front of me. The flame was small, but it was hot. Gavin's hand found mine under the table. He squeezed it. It wasn't a squeeze of comfort this time. It was a question. "Are you seeing this?" his grip asked. I squeezed back. Hard. "I see it." I looked at the stack of blue envelopes. I thought about the credit card number saved in Sharon's Amazon account, in Frank's travel app, in Brielle's Uber profile. I thought about the authorized user cards sitting in their wallets right now, warm and ready to be used. They thought the dinner was the event. They thought the announcement was the climax. They didn't know that the real event was happening in my head. I was done being the logistics manager for their happiness. I was done moving the containers to ensure their supply chain of luxury remained uninterrupted. The help was officially off duty. I picked up my water glass and took a sip. It was cool and crisp. "So," I said, my voice steady, cutting through their chatter about pasta and wine. "When do you leave?" 2 weeks, Sharon chirped. "Can you believe it? It came up so fast." 2 weeks. That was plenty of time. It was plenty of time for them to pack. It was plenty of time for them to brag to their friends. It was plenty of time for them to build the castle in the air. And it was plenty of time for me to prepare the demolition. I smiled at my mother. It was the first genuine smile I had given her in years, because it was the smile of a woman who finally knew the score. "That is wonderful," I said. "I hope you have everything you need." I looked at my kids. Leo looked up at me, surprised by my tone. He saw something in my face that made him sit up straighter. He saw the mother who managed international freight for a living. He saw the woman who didn't take no for an answer. I wasn't going to make a scene at the table. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of calling me hysterical. I wasn't going to let Brielle capture my breakdown for her followers. I was going to wait. I was going to let them walk all the way to the edge of the cliff, thinking I was still paving the road beneath their feet, and then I was simply going to step aside. The dinner ended with hugs that felt like cardboard. I kissed my father on the cheek. I told my mother the roast was delicious. I hugged Brielle and told her the trip would be great content for her channel. As we walked out to the car, the night air was cold and biting. "Mom," Leo asked as we buckled up, "are we going home?" "Yes," I said. "We are going home." I started the engine. I looked at the house one last time. The lights were blazing in the dining room. I could see their silhouettes moving around. probably opening another bottle of wine, probably laughing about how well I took the news. I shifted the car into reverse. "Gavin," I said quietly. "Yeah." "When we get home," I said, staring straight ahead at the dark road. "I need you to help me find the number for the fraud department." Gavin didn't ask why. He didn't ask if I was sure. He just reached over and rested his hand on the back of my neck. "I have it saved in my phone," he said. We drove away from the perfect house with the perfect lawn and the perfect family, leaving them to their celebration. I didn't know it yet, but that was the last meal I would ever eat at that table. And looking back, even with the hunger gnawing at my stomach, I have never felt more full. The drive home from Maple Glen was a blur of highway markers and taillights, a tunnel of silence that Gavin respected enough not to break. We pulled into our driveway at 10:45 at night. The house was dark, save for the porch light that our automatic timer had dutifully switched on. It stood there, a beacon of the life I actually owned, the life I actually paid for, separate from the manner of expectations I had just left behind. We carried the sleeping children inside. Sam was a dead weight on my shoulder, smelling of the strawberry shampoo I had washed his hair with that morning, a scent that felt like it belonged to a different era. I tucked him in. I tucked Maya in. I pulled the duvet up to Leo's chin. He stirred, mumbling something about a boat, and I smoothed the hair back from his forehead. My hand lingered there. The heat of his skin grounded me. It reminded me that the stakes were not theoretical. They were sleeping right here in these beds. When I came downstairs, the kitchen was illuminated only by the under-cabinet lights, casting a sterile, clinical glow on the granite countertops. Gavin was standing by the kettle. He was not pouring wine. Usually, after a dinner with my parents, we would open a bottle of red and drink until the edges of their passive-aggressive comments softened. But tonight, Gavin was making tea. Earl Grey, strong. It was a signal. Alcohol is for coping. Tea is for strategy. "Sit," he said. He placed a steaming mug in front of me on the island. I sat. I pulled my phone out of my coat pocket and laid it on the counter. It looked like an innocent black rectangle. It was actually the detonator. "I need to see it," I said. My voice sounded strange in the quiet kitchen. It was stripped of the daughterly cadence I had used for 3 decades. It was the voice I used in boardrooms when a vendor tried to overcharge for shipping containers. "See what?" Gavin asked. Though he knew. "The damage," I said. "The receipts." I opened the banking app. Face ID recognized me. The little wheel spun for a second, a digital pause that felt like the intake of breath before a scream. Then, the dashboard loaded. I navigated to the credit card tab, Platinum Rewards, ending in 4589. I tapped on recent transactions. I expected to see the usual friction, a few $100s here, a restaurant bill there. I was prepared for the petty larceny I had grown accustomed to. I was not prepared for the grand theft. I scrolled. My finger moved down the glass, and with every swipe, the air in the kitchen seemed to get colder. Pending Samsonite luggage store, $1,200. Pending Allianz Global Travel Insurance, $850. Pending Grand Hotel Vesuvio. Deposit, $600. Pending Rail Europe, $400. The timestamps told a story that was even crueler than the charges themselves. The luggage was bought 3 days ago. The travel insurance was purchased yesterday morning. The hotel deposit was put down on Friday. They had not just announced the trip tonight. They had been planning it, funding it, and insuring it on my dime for days, perhaps weeks, while I was at work, managing logistics for a global supply chain. My mother was online, using my credit line to buy insurance for a trip she explicitly told me I would ruin. "They bought new luggage," I whispered. I looked up at Gavin. "They have luggage. They have the set I bought them for their anniversary 3 years ago. But they bought new luggage, $1,200 worth of luggage." Gavin took a sip of his tea. He leaned against the counter, his arms crossed. He did not look surprised. He looked like a man who was watching a bridge collapse that he had long ago predicted was structurally unsound. "They are upgrading," he said. "New trip, New image, new bags. You do not bring old luggage to the Amalfi Coast. I looked back at the screen. Pending Delta Airlines. Priority seat selection. $300. They had charged for seat selection. They wanted the exit row. They wanted the extra legroom. They did not even ask, I said. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. It is not just that they excluded us. It is that they felt entitled to use my resources to facilitate the exclusion. They are using my money to fly away from me. It was a level of cognitive dissonance that bordered on pathology. In their minds, the credit card was not my money. It was a family resource. It was a utility, like the water coming out of the tap. You do not ask the faucet for permission to drink. You just turn it on. I was the faucet, and they were thirsty. I kept scrolling. Pending rush my passport. .com. Expedited document service. $450. I stopped. My finger hovered over the glass. Look at this, I said, shoving the phone toward Gavin. He read the line. He looked back at me. They expedited the passports, he said. Brielle, I said. Her passport expired last year. I remember reminding her to renew it. She never did. She must have realized it this week. So she used your card to rush it, Gavin said. She used my money to ensure she could leave the country on time, I said. To go on the trip that I am not allowed to go on because my children are too much trouble. The anger that had been simmering in my gut since the dinner table suddenly cooled. It crystallized. It turned into something hard and sharp, like a diamond. Hot anger makes you scream. Cold anger makes you calculate. I took the phone back. I sat the mug of tea aside. I did not want comfort. I wanted clarity. Gavin, I said, if I do this, there is no going back. If I cut them off, really cut them off, they will not see it as a boundary. They will see it as a declaration of war. They will say I am being petty. They will say I am jealous. They will weaponize the grandkids. They will tell the aunts and uncles I went crazy. Gavin looked me in the eye. The kitchen clock ticked. Tick, tick, tick. Emery, he said, you have two choices. You can keep paying for the privilege of being treated like a servant. You can keep teaching our kids that they are worth less than their cousins. Or you can stop, he paused. One boundary, he said, or a war. But looking at that screen, I think the war started a long time ago. You just did not realize you were the target. One boundary or a war. I looked at the transaction list again. Samsonite, Delta, Allianz. It wasn't just money, it was respect. It was dignity. One, I said. I tapped the menu icon in the top corner of the app. I went to card services. I went to manage authorized users. The list popped up. Frank Hernandez. Sharon Hernandez. I did not hesitate. I did not tremble. My hands were steady, steadier than they had been all night. I tapped on Frank Hernandez. A prompt appeared. Are you sure you want to remove this authorized user? Their card will be deactivated immediately. I thought about the "without you and your kids" comment. I thought about the way he pointed his finger at me. I thought about the way he breathed a sigh of relief when I didn't fight back at dinner. I tapped remove. The screen loaded. A green checkmark appeared. User removed. One down. I tapped on Sharon Hernandez. I thought about the generic pajamas. I thought about the cute comments. I thought about the way she looked at Brielle with adoration and looked at me with expectation. I tapped remove. User removed. I sat there for a moment, staring at the empty list. The section that said authorized users was now blank. It looked clean. It looked right. But I wasn't done. Deleting them from the app was digital. But I needed to be physical. I needed to be sure. I needed a scorched earth policy. I minimized the app and opened the keypad. I dialed the number on the back of my own card. Customer service, I said to the automated voice. Fraud prevention. It was 11:15 at night. The hold music was a terrible. Tinny jazz loop. I waited. I watched the steam rise from my tea. Chase Sapphire Service, this is Mark. How can I help you? Hi, Mark, I said. My name is Emery Hernandez. I need to report a security concern on my account. I can help with that, Mark said. What is going on? I have just removed 2 authorized users from my account, I said. But I have reason to believe they have the physical card numbers saved in various online merchants and digital wallets. I need to ensure that absolutely no further charges can go through on those numbers. Not recurring charges, not pending charges, nothing. Okay, Mark said. I could hear him typing. Since you removed the users, the physical cards are deactivated. But you are right. Sometimes tokenized payments in digital wallets can linger. The safest way to handle this is to close the current account number entirely and issue you a brand new primary card with a new number. That will sever all previous links. Do it, I said. Okay, just so you know, this will decline any transactions that are currently in a pending state if the merchant tries to finalize them with the old credentials, Mark warned. And any subscriptions you have will need to be updated, I smiled. That is exactly what I want, I said. Decline everything. If anyone tries to run those numbers, I want the machine to scream at them. Understood, Mark said. I am processing that now. Your new card will be shipped overnight. It will arrive on Tuesday. The old account number is dead as of right now. Thank you, Mark, I said. You have been very helpful. I hung up. The silence in the kitchen felt different now. It wasn't the silence of a victim. It was the silence of a sniper who has just taken the shot and is waiting for the target to fall. I looked at Gavin. It is done. The cards are dead. The account is new. They are going to find out, Gavin said. Probably soon. They will find out when they try to pay for something, I said. Or when the hotel tries to put a hold on the card for the full amount. I picked up my phone again. My thumb hovered over the messaging app. The family group chat. Hernandez Fam Jam was silent. They were probably asleep, dreaming of the Mediterranean. I could warn them. I could send a text right now saying, FYI, I canceled the cards. It would be the polite thing to do. It would give them time to scramble, to use their own money, to fix the mess. But they hadn't given me a warning. They hadn't given me a heads up that I was being fired from the family vacation. They had ambushed me at dinner. Why should I provide customer service for a crisis they created? I am not going to tell them, I said. Gavin raised an eyebrow. Radio silence. Total radio silence, I said. Let them walk into the wall. They think I am the logistics manager. Well, the manager just went on strike. I took a sip of the tea. It was still hot. And one more thing, I said. I opened a new tab on my browser. I went to my travel rewards portal. For 10 years. I had been traveling for business. I had flown hundreds of thousands of miles. I had stayed in countless Marriotts and Hiltons. I had racked up a staggering amount of points that I never used because I was always too busy saving money or fixing my parents' problems. I had over 2 million points sitting in that account. Where is somewhere warm? I asked. Somewhere with a beach. Somewhere they do not speak English as a first language. So I can pretend I do not understand if my phone rings. Gavin smiled. A real smile this time. Puerto Rico, he said. Costa Verde, direct flight, no passport needed for the kids, but it feels a world away. I typed it in. Costa Verde. A resort popped up. The Palms at Costa Verde, 5 stars. Oceanfront suites, kids club, swim-up bar. I looked at the dates. I selected the exact same week my parents were going to Europe. Book with points, the screen asked. I clicked yes. Flight selection. First class. 4 tickets. Book with points. Yes. I watched the confirmation screen load. Your trip is confirmed. Prepare for paradise. It cost me $0. It cost me 0 stress. And best of all, it required 0 permission from Frank or Sharon Hernandez. I turned the phone screen off and set it face down on the counter. We are going to Puerto Rico, I told Gavin. First class. The kids are going to flip, he said. Good, I said. I stood up and walked over to the sink to rinse my cup. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't guilt. I waited for the guilt, checked for it like I was checking for a pulse, but it wasn't there. Instead, there was only relief. "Gavin," I said, looking out the window at the dark outline of the oak tree in our yard. "Yeah. If my kids do not belong in their picture," I said, "then my money does not belong in their wallet." I turned off the kitchen light. We walked up the stairs in the darkness, leaving the ghosts of my obligation downstairs, locked in a dead credit card account that was rapidly cooling. Just like their love. 5 o'clock in the morning usually feels like a punishment. It is the hour of cold floors, jarring alarms, and the desperate, gritty need for caffeine. But today, waking up felt like inhaling pure oxygen. I moved through the house with a quiet efficiency that I had honed over years of managing crises. Only this time, the crisis was averted before we even left the driveway. I woke the children gently. There was no shouting, no frantic rushing to find lost shoes, no passive-aggressive comments from my mother about how we were running late. "Up we go, team," I whispered, pulling the covers back from Leo's bed. He blinked at me, his hair sticking up in a chaotic tuft. "Is it time?" "It is time," I said. We were in the car by 5:30. The world outside was dark and draped in a heavy mist, the kind that swallows headlights and turns the suburbs into a gray dreamscape. As I backed out of the garage, the silence in the car was heavy, but it wasn't tense. It was the silence of anticipation. "Mom," Sam asked from the back seat. His voice was thick with sleep. "Is Grandma coming?" My hands tightened on the steering wheel for a fraction of a second. It was a reflex, a muscle memory of years of managing their expectations, of preparing them for the inevitable slight or criticism. I looked at him in the rearview mirror. "Not this time, buddy," I said, keeping my voice light and easy. "This trip is just for us, just the 5 of us." "Cool," he said, and then immediately went back to sleep. That was it. No devastation, no tears. He didn't need them. He just needed to know who was in his corner. We arrived at the airport at 6:15. The terminal was humming with the low-frequency buzz of travelers. We checked our bags efficiently, quietly, without anyone complaining about the weight limits or demanding I switch items between suitcases to avoid a fee. We moved through security like water. As we put our shoes back on at the benches past the TSA checkpoint, my phone vibrated in my pocket. It wasn't a notification. It was a sustained, angry buzz. I checked the time. 6:45, right on schedule. My parents' flight to Rome was scheduled to depart at 9:30. That meant they were standing at the international check-in counter right now. They were handing over their passports. They were lifting their brand-new $1,200 luggage onto the scale, and they were handing the agent the credit card to pay for the baggage fees and the last-minute upgrades they always insisted on. The phone stopped buzzing, then it started again immediately. Mom calling. I finished tying Maya's shoe. I stood up, took a sip of my water, and looked at Gavin. He gave me a nod. I slid the green icon across the screen. "Hello," I said. "Emery." Sharon's voice was a harsh whisper. Vibrating with panic, I could hear the background noise of the terminal, the announcements, the clatter of conveyor belts. "Emery, pick up. Oh, you are there. Listen to me. Something is wrong with the card." I walked a few paces away from the kids, toward a large window overlooking the tarmac. "What do you mean?" "The lady," Sharon hissed. "The agent. She says the card is declined. I told her to run it again. She ran it 3 times. There is a line forming behind us. Emery. People are staring. It is humiliating. Call the bank immediately. Tell them we are traveling. You must have forgotten to put the travel notice on." She was so certain. She was so absolutely convinced that this was a clerical error, a glitch in the service she was entitled to. "I did not forget, Mom," I said. My voice was level. It was the voice I used when I had to tell a client their shipment was lost at sea. "Then fix it," she snapped, her whisper turning into a bark. "Frank is trying to find another card. But he only has the debit card for the local credit union, and he does not want to use that for the deposit. Just call them. Mom, I said, cutting through her panic. The card is not declined because of a travel notice. It is declined because I closed the account. There was a silence on the other end of the line that was so profound I thought the call had dropped. You what? I removed you as authorized users, I said, and then I closed the card number so it could not be used digitally. It is dead. Mom, it is a piece of plastic. You. Her voice shook. It wasn't sadness. It was the shaking of a person who has just been slapped in public. You cannot do that. We are at the airport. I know, I said. You announced the trip on Sunday. You said I would slow you down. So I removed the thing that was speeding you up. Emery, this is not funny, she screamed. The whisper was gone. I could hear people in the background at her terminal murmuring. We have non-refundable tickets. We have reservations. We need to check the bags. I guess you will have to use your own money, I said. We do not have that kind of liquidity available right this second, she yelled. Everything is tied up in the transfers, Emery. Put the card back on. Right now. No, I said. How dare you? She spat. After we raised you, after we let you live in our house, you are going to ruin a $10,000 trip over a temper tantrum. I am not ruining it, I said. I am just not paying for it. Have a safe flight. I hung up. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of the severing. It was done. I had said the words. I walked back to the kids. Okay, let's go find our gate. But the phone was not done with me. It started buzzing again before I could take 2 steps. Brielle, a text message popped up on the screen. Fix it. Mom is crying. We are standing here like idiots. The agent is threatening to move us out of the priority line. Emery, this is insane. I looked at the text. I could picture Brielle perfectly. She would be standing there with her designer carry-on, looking around to see if anyone she knew was witnessing this. She wouldn't be worried about the money. She would be worried about the aesthetic of the breakdown. I typed back 2 words. Have fun. I put the phone back in my pocket. We reached our gate. It was calm. We were flying first class to San Juan, so we had priority boarding. The agent smiled at us. Zone 1, she asked. Yes, I said. My phone rang again. This time, the ID said Dad. I hesitated. Frank was different. Sharon was noise. Frank was pressure. Frank knew how to twist the knife. I answered. Emery, he said. His voice was low, controlled, dangerous. It was the voice he used when I was a teenager and I had missed curfew. I do not know what game you are playing, but you need to stop it, now. It is not a game, Dad, I said. It is a balance sheet correction. You are embarrassing your mother, he said. You are embarrassing the family. We are standing here with the gold tags on our bags and the card is useless. Do you have any idea how that looks? I imagine it looks like you cannot afford the trip you are taking, I said. Listen to me, he said, his voice dropping an octave. You are being petty. You are hurt because of the kids. I get it, but this is business. This is finance. You do not mix the two. Turn the card back on, and we will discuss your feelings when we get back. Discuss my feelings, as if my dignity was a zoning issue we could table for the next fiscal quarter. We are not discussing anything, I said. After everything we have done for you, he started, launching into the greatest hits album of parental guilt. We put a roof over your head. We paid for your wedding. I paid for my wedding, I cut him off. I have the receipts for that, too, and the roof over my head I moved out when I was 18. We are family, he shouted, losing his composure. You do not strand family at the airport. You are right, I said. You do not strand family. You also do not tell family they are a burden. You do not tell family they are too loud, or too sensitive, or too much. You told me my children would slow you down. Well, Dad, I am just making sure you can move as fast as you want, without my baggage. Emery, I swear to God. Name one thing, I said, my voice shaking slightly now, but only from the intensity of the truth. Name one thing about this trip, or the last 5 years of your life, that did not come with my credit card attached to it. Silence. Static. He couldn't do it. He literally couldn't name a single luxury, a single meal, a single upgrade that I hadn't subsidized. That is what I thought, I said. I pulled the phone away from my ear to hang up. But as I did, a flurry of notifications cascaded down the screen. They were coming from the banking app of the old card, the one I had just nuked. Transaction declined, Delta Sky Club. $400. Transaction declined, Delta Sky Club. $400. Transaction declined, Delta Sky Club. $400. Transaction declined, Delta in-flight Wi-Fi pre-purchase. $40. I stared at the screen. I almost laughed. It was a dark, incredulous laugh. They were currently standing at the check-in counter, arguing about the baggage fees, and yet, someone, probably Brielle or Dustin, was frantically trying to buy access to the VIP lounge. They were in the middle of a disaster, and their instinct was still to try and secure the luxury experience. They weren't trying to fix the relationship. They were trying to fix the comfort level. They didn't care that I was gone. They cared that the lounge access was gone. They are trying to buy lounge passes, I said to Gavin, showing him the screen. Right now, while Frank is yelling at me. Gavin shook his head. They are consistent. Emery? Frank was still shouting on the other end. Do not hang up on me if you do not fix this. Do not expect to be welcome at... I pressed the red button. Then, I did something I should have done years ago. I swiped down the control center of my phone. I tapped the little airplane icon. Airplane mode on. The signal bars disappeared. The Wi-Fi icon vanished. The world of Maple Glen. The world of the international terminal. The world of screaming parents and entitled siblings, it all ceased to exist. Silence. I looked up. The gate agent was calling our group. Zone 1, welcome aboard. I looked at my children. Leo was wearing his headphones, bobbing his head to music. Maya was holding her doll. Sam was jumping up and down, excited to see the big plane. They didn't know their grandmother was screaming at a ticket agent 3 terminals away. They didn't know their grandfather was threatening to disown their mother. They didn't know their aunt was posting a vague, angry status update about betrayal. All they knew was that Mom was here, Dad was here, and we were going somewhere warm. Come on, I said, taking Sam's hand. We walked down the jet bridge. It was cool and smelled of industrial carpet. We stepped onto the plane, first class. The seats were wide leather armchairs. There was plenty of legroom. The flight attendant was already there with a tray of beverages. Orange juice for the little ones, she asked with a smile. Yes, please, I said, and champagne for me. I settled into the seat. I buckled Sam in. I helped Leo adjust his screen. I made sure Maya had her blanket. I imagined the scene back at the other terminal. I imagined Frank frantically transferring money from his retirement account, paying fees he hated. I imagined them sitting at the back of the plane if they even made the flight in the middle seats, without the extra legroom, without the lounge access. Stripped of the status they had worn like a coat I bought them, they were in chaos. I took a sip of the champagne. It was cold and dry and perfect. I looked out the window as the plane began to push back. I couldn't hear the engines yet, just the soft hum of the cabin air. I was $40,000 richer than I was yesterday. But looking at my kids' faces, glowing with the excitement of an adventure that was finally, truly theirs, I realized the money was the least of what I had gained. I had bought my life back. The plane taxied toward the runway, turning away from the terminal where my family was unraveling and pointing its nose toward the south, toward the sun, and toward a silence that money couldn't buy. The air in Puerto Rico did not smell like obligation. It smelled of salt, roasted plantains, and a humidity so thick and sweet it felt like a warm embrace. We landed in San Juan just after noon, by 2 o'clock. We were walking into the lobby of the Palms at Costa Verde. The transition from the gray biting cold of Ohio to this kaleidoscope of turquoise and emerald was so jarring that it felt less like travel and more like teleportation. My shoulders, which had been hiked up toward my ears for the last decade, finally began to drop. The resort was open air. There were no walls, just pillars of white stone and a ceiling made of woven palm fronds. The ocean was right there, a shocking, vibrant blue that looked like it had been painted on by an overly enthusiastic child. "Welcome home," the concierge said, handing us glasses of iced passion fruit juice. Home. It was a script, a standard greeting for tourists. But the word landed in my chest with a strange weight. I had spent $40,000 a year trying to buy a sense of home in Maple Glen, and I had never once felt as welcome as I did right now. Accepting a free juice from a stranger who didn't know my last name or my credit score, we were led to our suite. It was a sprawling space with cool tile floors and a balcony that overlooked the water. The moment the bellman opened the sliding glass doors, the sound of the waves crashed into the room. It was a roar, a constant, rhythmic applause. Sam, my 4-year-old, dropped his backpack. He didn't look at me for permission. He didn't check to see if he was being too loud. He just ran. "Water!" he screamed. He sprinted across the room and out onto the balcony, pressing his face against the glass railing. "Mom, look at his moving." I watched him. My instinct, the instinct trained into me by years of Sunday dinners and hushed car rides with my parents, was to say, "Shh, Sam," inside voice. It was to say, "Don't run. You might break something." It was to say, "Be small, be quiet, be grateful." But the words died in my throat. I looked at Leo. He was standing by the door. His suitcase handle gripped tight in his hand. He was 10 years old, but he carried the anxiety of a middle-aged accountant. He was watching Sam with wide eyes, waiting for the reprimand. He was waiting for Frank to bark, or for Sharon to sigh and rub her temples. He was waiting for the punishment that usually followed joy. I walked over to him. I knelt down so I was eye level. "Leo," I said softly. He looked at me. "Is Sam in trouble?" "No," I said. "Go look at the ocean." "But he is yelling," Leo whispered. "I know," I said. "The ocean is loud. You can be loud too." Leo hesitated. He looked at the balcony, then back at me. It was a heartbreaking calculation. He was weighing the safety of silence against the risk of happiness. "Go," I nudged him gently. He dropped his suitcase. He walked slowly at first, then faster, until he was running too. He joined Sam at the railing. "Whoa," I heard him say, and then, for the first time in months, I heard him laugh. It wasn't the polite, stifled chuckle he used at my parents' house. It was a belly laugh, loose and unself-conscious. I stood there in the middle of the room, watching them. Gavin came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. He rested his chin on my shoulder. "They are waiting for the other shoe to drop," he said quietly. "I know," I said. Tears pricked my eyes. Not tears of sadness, but tears of sudden, sharp clarity. I did this to them. I let them think that love was something you had to audition for. I let them think that being good meant being invisible. "You did not do it," Gavin corrected me. "You survived it, and now you are fixing it." We spent the afternoon at the beach. We built sandcastles that were structurally unsound and gloriously messy. We ate tacos from a shack that dripped salsa onto our chins. We didn't worry about stains. We didn't worry about manners. At one point, Maya, my 7-year-old, accidentally knocked over a stranger's iced tea while running to catch a frisbee. I froze. My internal alarm blared crisis. Apologize profusely, offer to pay, scold the child, shame the child so the stranger knows you are a good parent. But before I could move, the stranger, an older man with skin like tanned leather, just laughed. "No worries, little one," he called out. "The ice was melting anyway." Maya looked at me, terrified. "It is okay," I called back to her. "Tell him you are sorry and keep playing." "Sorry," she chirped, and then she was gone, running into the surf. She didn't carry the shame with her. She dropped it and moved on. I sat back on my lounge chair and exhaled. They trained you to pay for belonging, Gavin said, watching the kids. He was drinking a local beer, his sunglasses reflecting the horizon. They made you think that if you just wrote a big enough check, or bought the right gift, or stayed quiet enough, they would finally let you in. We are unlearning that. We are unlearning the idea that we have to rent our space in the world. I looked at him. It is going to take a while. We have time, he said. We have the rest of our lives. I reached for my phone to check the time, and the screen lit up. I had kept it on airplane mode during the flight, but I had turned the Wi-Fi on at the resort. The notifications were waiting for me. They weren't texts or calls this time. I had muted those threads. These were from the bank. Transaction declined. Hertz Rent-A-Car Rome, €800. Transaction declined Hotel Eden Rome. Deposit authorization, €1,500. Transaction declined Trenitalia, €200. I stared at the screen. It was almost evening in Rome. They had landed. They had somehow made it to Italy, perhaps using Frank's debit card, perhaps dipping into savings they swore they didn't have. But the habit was so deep, so ingrained, that they were still trying to use my card. They were standing at the rental car counter, probably arguing with a clerk, instinctively handing over the card with my name on it, expecting the magic money fairy to smooth the road. They weren't just thieves. They were addicts. They were addicted to the ease of my life. I felt a flash of the old panic. What if they are stranded? What if they can't get to the hotel? Then I looked at Leo, who was currently burying Sam's legs in the sand, both of them shrieking with laughter. If I enabled my parents now, if I unlocked that card for even 5 minutes to help them, I would be stealing from Leo. I would be stealing his peace to pay for their comfort. I opened the banking app. I didn't just check the balance. I went into the security settings for the new account number that had just been issued. Lock card, report stolen, request new number. I wasn't just changing the locks. I was burning down the door. "What are you doing?" Gavin asked, seeing the intensity on my face. "They are trying to rent a car," I said. "I am making sure they have to walk." I put the phone away. I dug my toes into the warm sand. That night, we ordered room service. We ate on the balcony, watching the moon paint a silver stripe across the black water. The kids were exhausted, their skins smelling of sunscreen and salt. Maya was drawing on a piece of resort stationery with a crayon she had found in her backpack. She was biting her lip in concentration. "What are you making, baby?" I asked. She held it up. It was a crude, colorful list. She had drawn a sun, a cone with 3 scoops of ice cream, and a bed. "It is our plan," she announced proudly. "Grandma always has a plan. This is our plan." I took the paper. Beach, ice cream, sleep in. I looked at it. I remembered the itinerary Sharon had handed out at dinner, the minute-by-minute schedule of museums, tours, and mandatory family photos that I wasn't invited to. It was a schedule designed to impress. Maya's schedule was designed to live. "This is the best itinerary I have ever seen," I said. "I approve this plan." "Can we have ice cream for breakfast?" Sam asked. I looked at Gavin. He shrugged. "We are on island time." "Yes," I said. "Tomorrow, we have ice cream for breakfast." The kids cheered. It was a small victory, a tiny rebellion against the rigid nutritional rules my mother always enforced when she visited. "Sugar makes them hyper. Emery, control your children." Later, after the kids were showered and tucked into the massive king-sized beds, Leo stayed awake. He was staring at the ceiling fans spinning lazily above him. I sat on the edge of the bed. "You okay?" I asked. "Mom," he said softly, "why didn't Grandma come? Did we do something bad?" My heart fractured. Even here, thousands of miles away, the ghost of their rejection lingered. He thought their absence was a punishment for his behavior. I brushed the hair off his forehead. I needed to explain this carefully. I couldn't tell him his grandfather was a narcissist and his grandmother was an enabler. He was 10. "No, Leo," I said firmly. "You did nothing wrong. You are perfect." "Then why did they go to Europe without us?" he asked. "They said we would slow them down." He had heard it. Of course he had heard it. I took a deep breath. "Listen to me. Sometimes. Adults are not very good at being adults. Sometimes. They think that love is about everyone doing exactly what they want, exactly when they want it. And when people don't fit into their picture perfectly, they get confused." "Like with puzzle pieces?" he asked. "Exactly like puzzle pieces," I said. "Grandpa and Grandma have a puzzle they want to build. It is a very stiff, square puzzle, but we are not square pieces. Leo, we are round, and star-shaped, and interesting. We don't fit in their puzzle." "I like being star-shaped," he mumbled. "I like you being star-shaped too," I said. "And some adults, they confuse love with control. They think if they can't control you, they can't love you, but that is their mistake. It is not your fault. We are here because we want to be free to be whatever shape we want. Does that make sense?" He nodded slowly. "So we are on a star-shaped vacation." I smiled. "Yes, we are on a star-shaped vacation." He closed his eyes. Within minutes, his breathing evened out. I walked out onto the balcony where Gavin was waiting. The wind had picked up, warm and blustery. I leaned against the railing. I felt lighter, physically lighter. The knot of anxiety that lived permanently in my solar plexus, the one that tightened every time my phone rang, every time a holiday approached, every time I opened a bill, was gone. I wasn't waiting for a text. I wasn't waiting for a thank you that would never come. I wasn't waiting for permission to exist. "You know," I said, looking out at the dark ocean, "for 20 years, I thought I was the one slowing them down. I thought I was the anchor dragging the ship." Gavin handed me a glass of water. "And now? Now I realize I wasn't the anchor," I said. "I was the engine. And now that the engine is gone, they are just a boat drifting in the middle of the ocean." I took a sip of the water. "Let them drift," I said. I turned my back on the ocean and went back inside, sliding the glass door shut and locking it. Not to keep the world out, but to keep my family in. Safe, whole, and finally free of charge. The return to Ohio felt like walking into a wet wool sweater. We landed in Columbus on a Tuesday afternoon, dragging our suitcases through a terminal that was significantly less glamorous than the one we had left in San Juan. The sky was a bruised purple, threatening a storm that seemed to mirror the atmospheric pressure waiting for me on my phone. We drove home in relative silence. The kids were crashed out in the back seat, still wearing their island bracelets, their skins smelling faintly of coconut and sweat. They were happy. They were oblivious. When we pulled into the driveway, the house stood there, sturdy and quiet. It was a fortress, and I knew the siege was about to begin. I waited until Gavin had taken the kids upstairs to unpack before I finally turned my phone back on. I sat at the kitchen island, a glass of water in front of me, and held the device like it was a live grenade. I pressed the power button. The vibration started immediately. It was a continuous, angry buzz that lasted for a solid 2 minutes. Notifications cascaded down the screen in a waterfall of rage. I watched them scroll by, detaching myself from the words as if I were reading a case study about someone else's dysfunctional family. I opened the messages. I wasn't looking for apologies. I knew better than that. I was looking for patterns. There were 42 text messages, 7 voicemails, 3 emails. I scanned Brielle's texts first. "You are selfish. Do you have any idea how hard it is to get a hotel to take a debit card? I had to use my own savings. Emery, my savings. Mom is a wreck. I hope you are happy." I scanned Dustin's. "Come on, Em, pick up the phone. This is getting out of hand. Dad is talking about legal action. Just fix it. We are stuck in a 3-star hotel. The kids are miserable." I read through every single line. I read the accusations of selfishness. I read the guilt trips about ruining a once-in-a-lifetime experience. I read the threats about being cut out of the will, but I was looking for 5 specific words. We are sorry about Leo, or perhaps, we shouldn't have excluded Sam, or even, we made a mistake. I scrolled to the bottom, nothing, not a single syllable of remorse for how they treated my children. There was plenty of anger about their credit limits, their hotel star ratings, and their embarrassment, but the cause of the explosion, the cruelty toward my son and daughter, was completely ignored. To them, my reaction was the crime, and their action was just context. My phone rang in my hand. It was a local number I didn't recognize. I knew who it was. They knew I wouldn't answer their cell phones, so they were borrowing one, or maybe they had bought a burner. I answered. Hello? Your father had to borrow money from Uncle Jerry. It was Sharon. She didn't say hello. She didn't ask if I was back. She launched straight into the tragedy of her own reputation. Her voice was wet and ragged, the sound of a woman who had been crying for days, but not for the right reasons. Do you hear me, Emery? She sobbed. Uncle Jerry, he had to wire us $5,000. We were standing in the lobby of the hotel in Rome, and the card declined, and the concierge was looking at us like we were criminals. Frank had to call his brother and beg. I took a sip of water. That sounds uncomfortable. Uncomfortable, she shrieked. It was humiliating. Frank has never asked anyone for a dime in his life. He is a proud man. You broke him. Emery, you humiliated him in front of strangers and his own brother. He humiliated himself, I said calmly. He booked a trip he couldn't afford on a card he didn't own. It was the family card, she insisted. It was for us. It was in my name, I said, and the family didn't include my kids. So the card doesn't include you. Is that what this is about? She spat. The kids. You destroyed our vacation because Leo didn't get a ticket. He is 10. Emery. He wouldn't even appreciate the Vatican. Goodbye, Mom, I said. I hung up. I didn't block the number. I wanted the record. Then I opened my email. There was one from Frank. The subject line was in all caps. We need to talk like adults. I opened it. It was brief. Emery, we are returning on Thursday. Come to the house at 6 o'clock. We need to discuss the repayment plan for the distress you have caused. And we need to discuss the future of your standing in this family. Disrespect will no longer be tolerated. Frank, repayment plan, standing in the family. He was speaking to me like I was a delinquent employee on a performance improvement plan. He truly believed he still held the leverage. He thought that because he was Dad, he could summon me to a tribunal and I would show up. Head bowed, checkbook in hand. I deleted the email. I didn't reply. Thursday came and went. I didn't go to their house. I went to work. I picked up the kids from school. I made lasagna. I helped Leo with his math homework. I knew they were back. I could feel their presence in the zip code like a drop in barometric pressure. It happened on Friday evening. The sun had just set, casting long, dark shadows across the lawn. The kids were in the basement watching a movie. Gavin was in the garage working on a project. I was in the kitchen, wiping down the counters. I heard a car door slam. Then another. I didn't need to look out the window. I knew the sound of that slam. It was the sound of righteous indignation arriving on 4 wheels. I walked to the front door. I unlocked it, stepped out onto the porch, and pulled the door shut behind me. I heard the lock click. I stood in front of the door, crossing my arms over my chest. Frank and Sharon were walking up the driveway. They looked diminished. Frank, usually impeccably dressed, was wearing a wrinkled polo shirt. His face was gray and drawn. Sharon looked frantic, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her eyes swollen. They stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. They were on the concrete. I was on the wood. I had the high ground. You didn't come on Thursday, Frank said. His voice was hoarse. I didn't see a reason to, I said. Get out of the way, Emery, Sharon said, moving to step up. We are coming in. We need to sit down. No, I said. I didn't shout. I didn't move. I just said the word. It hung in the cool evening air like a brick wall. Sharon stopped, one foot on the bottom step. She looked at me as if I had spoken in a foreign language. "Excuse me. You are not coming in," I said. "My children are inside. They are happy. They are peaceful. I am not letting you bring that energy into my house." "That energy," Frank scoffed. He took a step forward, his face twisting into a sneer. "We are your parents. You do not bar us from your home. We have rights." "You have no rights here," I said. "This is my house. I pay the mortgage. I pay the utilities. I bought the welcome mat. And you are not welcome." Sharon let out a strangled sob and turned to look at the garage. "This is Gavin," she wailed. "I knew it. He has been poisoning you against us for years. This is his doing. He is controlling you." It was such a classic move. They couldn't conceive that their compliant, helpful daughter, could possibly have an independent thought of rebellion. It had to be the outsider. It had to be the husband. "Leave Gavin out of this," I said sharply. "This isn't Gavin. This is me." "This is the daughter you raised to be a doormat, finally standing up." "We raised you to be grateful," Frank shouted. He was losing his cool now. "We gave you everything." "You gave me a bill," I said. "For 30 years, you gave me a bill, and I paid it. I paid it with interest, but the account is closed." "You stranded us," Sharon cried. "You left us in Rome with nothing. Do you know how scared I was? Do you know how scared Leo was when you told him he wasn't good enough to go with you?" I asked. My voice dropped, becoming deadly quiet. "Do you know how it feels for a 10-year-old boy to hear his grandfather say he is a burden? He asked me if he was bad. He asked me why you didn't love him." Sharon flinched. For a second, just a split second, I saw guilt flicker in her eyes. But Frank stomped over it. "Oh, stop being so dramatic," Frank snapped. "He is a child. He doesn't understand context. We were trying to have an adult trip. We have the right to enjoy our retirement without babysitting, and I have the right to protect my children from people who view them as an inconvenience," I said. I looked at them both. I looked at the people who had formed me, who had installed the buttons they were now frantically trying to push. I felt a profound sense of sadness, but it was a distant sadness, like watching a ship sink on the horizon. "Here is the deal," I said. Frank crossed his arms, mimicking my posture. "We are listening. You want to come inside?" I asked. "You want to be grandparents. You want to be part of this family." "Of course we do," Sharon said, wiping her eyes. "Then you apologize," I said. "We are sorry you felt hurt," Sharon started. "No," I cut her off. "Not to me. To them. You will walk into that basement. You will look Leo and Maya and Sam in the eye, and you will say, 'We are sorry we left you out. We are sorry we said you would slow us down. We love you, and we were wrong.'" I paused, and I continued. "You will acknowledge that the financial support is over. You will never ask me for $1 again. You will never mention the word inheritance or repayment. We start from zero, equal footing, just family, no business." The silence that followed was heavy. The wind rustled the leaves in the oak tree. A dog barked somewhere down the street. Frank stared at me. His face went through a series of contortion shock, disbelief, and finally, a cold, hard resolve. He looked at the basement window, where the blue light of the television was flickering. Then he looked back at me. "Apologize to the children," he repeated. The disdain in his voice was thick enough to choke on. "For going on a vacation? That is ridiculous." "Is it?" I asked. "I am the grandfather," Frank said, drawing himself up to his full height, which suddenly seemed much shorter than I remembered. "I do not apologize to 10-year-olds for making executive decisions. They need to learn resilience. They need to learn their place." "Their place," I repeated. "Yes," Frank said, "and your place is to support this family, not tear it apart over a slight—" I looked at Sharon. She was looking at Frank, waiting for his cue. She wouldn't look at me. She wouldn't choose the grandkids over the husband who kept her in the lifestyle she coveted. So that is your answer, I said. You would rather be right than be their grandparents. You are being unreasonable, Frank said. You will get over this. You always do. Not this time, I said. I reached for the door handle behind me. Go home, Dad, I said. Go home and pay Uncle Jerry back. Figure it out. If you close that door, Sharon said, her voice shaking with a mix of rage and fear, you are cutting us off. You know that, right? We won't come back. You will regret this. Emery, you will need us one day, and we won't be there. I haven't needed you in 20 years, Mom, I said. I just needed you to love my kids, and clearly, that price was too high. You will regret this, she screamed, her voice cracking. I looked at her one last time. I saw the fear in her eyes. It wasn't fear of losing me. It was fear of the vacuum I was leaving behind. Who would they blame now? Who would they bill now? I said, I might regret it one day. I thought of Leo laughing on the beach in Puerto Rico. I thought of Maya drawing her itinerary. I thought of the peace in my house before they pulled into the driveway. But not more than I regret letting my kids feel optional, I said. I stepped back inside. I closed the heavy oak door. I didn't slam it. I just clicked it shut. I turned the deadbolt. Clunk. I stood there in the hallway for a moment, listening. I could hear them shouting something on the porch, muffled by the wood and the insulation. Then, silence. Then, the car doors slamming again. The engine revved, aggressive and loud, and then faded away down the street. I let out a breath that felt like it had been trapped in my lungs since I was 12 years old. My hands were shaking, just a little. Gavin appeared at the top of the basement stairs. He held a wrench in his hand, looking ready to use it if necessary. Is it over? He asked quietly. Yeah, I said, leaning my forehead against the cool wood of the door. They didn't want to come in. They just wanted to win. Are you okay? I turned around. The house was warm. The smell of lasagna was still in the air. I could hear the faint sound of a cartoon playing downstairs. I am, I said, and I was surprised to find that it was the truth. I really am. I had lost my parents. I knew that. They wouldn't call back. They wouldn't apologize. The narrative in Maple Glen would be that I had gone crazy, that I was ungrateful, that I had abandoned them in their old age. But as I walked toward the basement to sit with my children, I realized I hadn't lost anything that was actually mine. I had just stopped paying for the rental. The silence in the house after my parents drove away was not empty. It was heavy. It was the kind of silence that demands to be filled. Not with noise, but with answers. I locked the front door. I checked it twice. Then I walked into the kitchen, poured the rest of the cold tea down the sink, and opened my laptop. Gavin was downstairs with the kids, distracting them with a movie marathon, giving me the space I needed to do the thing I should have done 5 years ago. I was not going to cry. I was not going to rage. I was going to audit. I work in logistics. My entire career is built on tracking things. I track shipping containers from Shanghai to Long Beach. I track fuel surcharges. I track variance reports down to the decimal point. And yet, for half a decade, I had treated my own finances with the willful blindness of a child covering her eyes during a scary movie. I logged into the bank portal. I didn't just look at the current month. I went to the Statements tab. I selected the custom date range option. Start date January, 5 years ago, end date today, format CSV. I downloaded the spreadsheet. It was a massive file. I opened it, and the screen filled with thousands of rows of data. I started sorting. Filter by authorized user Frank Hernandez. Filter by authorized user Sharon Hernandez. The total sum at the bottom of the column made my breath hitch. I blinked, hoping I had misread the placement of the comma. I had not. Over 5 years. The total was not just the $40,000 a year I had estimated in my head. It was closer to $210,000. $210,000. That is a college education. That is a retirement fund. That is the lake house Gavin and I talked about buying someday. Some day had been spent, swipe by swipe, at department stores and steakhouses in Ohio. I began to look at the line items. I wanted to see the anatomy of the theft. I expected the travel. I knew about the flights to Florida, the anniversary trips to Napa. But as I scrolled, I saw things that made my stomach turn over. Cash advance $500. Cash advance $300. Cash advance $500. There were dozens of them. Cash advances come with exorbitant interest rates. They are the desperate act of someone who needs liquidity immediately. My father, the man who lectured me about fiscal responsibility, the man who claimed to have a diversified portfolio, was pulling cash off my credit card at ATMs in casinos and racetracks. I highlighted the rows. Casino, casino, off-track betting. Then I saw the electronics. Best Buy $2,000. Apple Store. $1,200. I looked at the dates. November 14th, 3 years ago. I remembered that date. I was in the hospital. I had pneumonia. I was on oxygen, terrified because my blood oxygen levels kept dropping. Sharon had come to visit me for 20 minutes. She had stood by the bed, wringing her hands, telling me I looked pale and that I should have taken better vitamins. She left early because she said she had errands. The timestamp on the Apple Store charge was 45 minutes after she left my hospital room. She had bought a new iPad while her daughter was gasping for air. I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. I looked for a pattern. I sorted the data by date and cross-referenced it with my own work calendar, which I keep meticulously archived. The biggest spending spikes the furniture, the jewelry. The high-end dining always happened during the last 2 weeks of the quarter. That is my busiest time at work. That is when I am working 14-hour days, when I am barely sleeping, when I'm checking my email at 3 in the morning. They knew. They knew exactly when I was too overwhelmed to check the statements. They knew exactly when my guard was down. They didn't just use me. They timed their extraction to coincide with my exhaustion. It was predatory. It was the behavior of a fox watching the farmer turn off the lights. Gavin came up from the basement. He had a bowl of popcorn in his hand. But he wasn't eating. He saw the spreadsheet on the screen. He saw the color of my face. "How bad?" he asked. "Bad," I said. "6 figures bad. Casino bad." He walked over and looked at the screen. He pointed to a recurring charge, country club membership. "You were paying his dues?" Gavin asked. "I thought he said he had a lifetime membership. Apparently the lifetime ended 5 years ago," I said. Gavin set the bowl down. His face was hard. "Emery, stop looking at the past for a second. We need to secure the future. If they are this desperate, if he is pulling cash advances for gambling, they are not going to stop just because you cut the card." "I closed the account," I said. "The card is dead." "That is one card," Gavin said. "You need to freeze your credit, today, right now, if they have your social security number, and they do. Because they are your parents, they might try to open something else." I wanted to say he was paranoid. I wanted to say that Frank Hernandez, the pillar of the community, would never stoop to identity theft. But I looked at the spreadsheet. I looked at the hospital date. "Okay," I said. I opened a new tab. I went to the credit bureau website. I started with Equifax. I entered my information. Name, social, date of birth. The report loaded. I scanned the summary. Credit score 780. Good. Total accounts. Open lines of credit. And then I saw it, under the section labeled Recent Hard Inquiries. There was an entry from 3 days ago. Lending Club Personal Loans. Inquiry date, Tuesday. Status, pending. I froze. I have never applied for a loan from Lending Club. I have a mortgage with a major bank. I have a car loan with the dealership. I do not use online peer-to-peer lenders. "Gavin," I said. My voice was a whisper. He leaned in. "What is that?" I asked, pointing to the screen. "That is an application for a personal loan," he said. "For $25,000. I clicked on the details. The application had been submitted online. The applicant's name was Emery Hernandez. The social security number was mine. but the address was not my address in Cedar Ridge. It was 42 Oak Lane, Maple Glen, my parents' house, and the contact phone number was not mine. It was Frank's cell phone. The room spun. This wasn't authorized user abuse. This wasn't taking advantage. This was a crime. My father had sat at my dining table on Sunday, announced he was cutting me out of the family trip, and at the same time, he had an active loan application pending in my name to fund that very trip. He was going to steal $25,000 from me, stick me with the debt, and go sip wine in Italy while I ruined my credit score paying it off. "Freeze it," Gavin said. His voice was urgent. "Freeze it all. Equifax, TransUnion, Experian, do it now." I moved fast. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I created accounts. I set pins. I clicked freeze on every single bureau. "Your credit file is now frozen. No new creditors can access your report." I sat back in the chair. I felt sick. Physically, violently sick. "They crossed the line," I said. "They did not just cross the line," Gavin said. "They burned the border. Emery, you need a lawyer." "I can't sue my parents," I said instinctively. It was the last vestige of the brainwashing speaking. "Family business stays in the family." "This is not a lawsuit," Gavin said. "This is protection. If that loan had gone through, you would be on the hook. You need to file a police report for identity theft." "A police report?" I stared at him. "You want me to arrest my dad?" "I want you to not go to jail for fraud," Gavin said. "If you do not report it as fraud, the bank assumes you authorized it. You have to go on record." Monday morning. I did not go to work. I took a personal day. I sat in the office of a woman named Sarah Jenkins. She was a forensic accountant and attorney who specialized in elder financial abuse. Though usually, she represented the elders being abused by their children. She found my case refreshing, which was a terrible word to hear in a law office. I laid the spreadsheet on her desk. I laid the credit report with the fraudulent inquiry next to it. I laid the printout of the text messages from Frank threatening me. Sarah put on her glasses. She read in silence for 10 minutes. The only sound in the office was the hum of the air conditioner and the scratching of her pen. Finally, she looked up. "Mrs. Hernandez," she said, "I am going to be blunt. This is not a family dispute. This is grand larceny. This is wire fraud. And this loan application, this is federal identity theft." "They are my parents," I said weakly. "They just feel entitled." "Entitlement is an emotion," Sarah said. "Signing someone else's name to a loan document is a felony. There is no family discount in the penal code." She tapped the paper. "You have a choice," she said. "You can walk away, pay off the $200,000 they stole over the years, and hope they do not find another way to use your identity. Or you can file an affidavit of fraud. This will permanently block the loan. It will flag your social security number so they can never use it again. It will likely trigger an investigation into the other charges." "Oh, will they go to prison?" I asked. "Unlikely for a first offense with a family member who declines to press full criminal charges," she said. "But they will be blacklisted. They will face fines. And most importantly, the financial cord will be cut with a scalpel, not scissors." I thought about the hospital room. I thought about the iPad. I thought about Leo asking if he was bad. "File it," I said. "Are you sure?" Sarah asked. "This is the nuclear option." "They launched the missile," I said. "I am just shooting it down." We spent the next 2 hours filling out forms. I signed affidavits. I wrote a statement detailing that I did not live at the Maple Glen address and did not authorize the inquiry. I provided the IP address logs from my home to prove I wasn't the one who submitted the application. It was clinical. It was paperwork. But every signature felt like I was signing a divorce decree. When I walked out of her office, the sun was shining. It was a bright, crisp Ohio day. I walked to my car. I had a folder in my hand that contained the proof of my parents' betrayal. I sat in the driver's seat and looked at the building. For years, Frank and Sharon had wanted the fast life. They wanted the expedited passports. They wanted the priority boarding. They wanted the fast lane to luxury without putting in the work. They got their wish. They tried to travel fast. I put the car in gear. But now, as the fraud alerts started to hit their phones, as the banks froze their accounts for investigation, as the loan application was flagged and rejected, they were about to experience the one thing they hated most. You wanted fast travel, I whispered to the empty car. Now you get slow consequences. I drove home. I had a family to feed, and for the first time in 5 years, every dollar in my account belonged to the people sitting at my table. The court of public opinion opened for session on a Wednesday morning, and the opening statement was a filtered photo of a sad-looking latte on Instagram. Brielle posted it at 9 o'clock. The caption was a masterpiece of vague, passive-aggressive victimization. Some people will abandon their own family over money. It is sad when greed changes the people you thought you could trust. Holding my real ones close today. Family first betrayal, heartbroken. She didn't tag me. She didn't have to. The comment section was already filling up with sympathetic heart emojis from our cousins, my old high school friends, and neighbors I hadn't spoken to in years. So sorry you are going through this. Money really is the root of all evil. Stay strong. I scrolled past it. I didn't comment. I didn't like it. I just took a screenshot and dragged it into a folder on my desktop labeled Evidence. But the digital smear campaign was just the air support. The ground invasion began with the phone calls. My father, realizing that his financial supply lines had been cut, had decided to pivot to the only currency he had left: his reputation. He was calling the aunts, the uncles, the second cousins in Cleveland. He was spinning a narrative where I was the unstable, hysterical daughter who had snapped under pressure and vindictively stranded her elderly parents in a foreign country. Emery went crazy, he told my Uncle Jerry. She is having some kind of breakdown. We are worried about her mental state. It was a brilliant strategy. If I was crazy, then my freezing of the credit was an act of madness, not a rational response to theft. If I was crazy, he was the victim. By Friday, the summons arrived. It wasn't a subpoena, but it felt like one. My Aunt Marla, my mother's older sister and the matriarch of the extended family, called me. "Emery," she said, her voice stern, "we are having a get-together on Saturday afternoon. Just coffee and cake. Your parents will be there. Dustin will be there. You need to come." "I do not think that is a good idea, Aunt Marla," I said. "I am not asking," she said. "This family is bleeding, and we are going to stitch it up. Be here at 2. I hung up. I looked at Gavin. "It is a trap," he said. "They want to ambush you. They want to pressure you into reopening the tap in front of an audience so you will be too embarrassed to say no." "I know," I said. I walked over to the printer in my home office. I picked up the stack of papers I'd organized the night before, the bank statements, the loan inquiry, the text messages. "But I am going," I said, "and I am bringing show and tell." We arrived at Aunt Marla's house at 2 o'clock sharp. The driveway was full. It looked like a holiday gathering. There were at least 15 people inside: cousins, spouses, the core of the Hernandez clan. When I walked into the living room, the conversation died instantly. It was the kind of silence that has mass. It pressed against my eardrums. Frank and Sharon were sitting on the plush beige sofa in the center of the room, looking like survivors of a natural disaster. Sharon was clutching a tissue. Frank was staring at the floor, his posture slumped in a performance of profound grief. Brielle was sitting on the arm of the sofa, her hand resting protectively on Sharon's shoulder, looking at me with a mix of defiance and triumph. They had the audience. They had the stage. "Emery," Aunt Marla said, stepping forward. She was a formidable woman with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Thank you for coming. Sit down." There was a single wooden chair placed in the center of the room, facing the sofa. It looked like a witness stand. I didn't sit. I stood behind the chair, my hands resting on the back of it. I felt the cool leather of the folder tucked under my arm. "We are all here," Aunt Marla began, addressing the room, "because things have gotten out of hand. Frank tells us there was a misunderstanding with the travel arrangements. He says you canceled the cards without warning and left them in a very difficult position. Frank looked up. His eyes were cold, but his voice was trembling with manufactured emotion. I do not care about the money. Emery, he said, I care that you would do this to us, to your family. Over what a ticket you stranded your mother at an airport. You humiliated us. She is just jealous, Brielle chimed in, her voice shrill. She has always been jealous that she has to work so hard, and we well. We know how to enjoy life. She wanted to ruin it for us. A murmur of agreement went through the room. I saw my cousin Mike shake his head in disappointment. I saw Uncle Jerry looking at me with pity. They had bought the story. They thought I was the bitter, tight-fisted daughter punishing her parents for their joy. Is that the story? I asked. My voice was calm. It did not shake. That I am jealous. That I stranded you because of a ticket. You had a tantrum, Dustin said from the corner. Crossing his arms. Admit it. You snapped. I placed the folder on the coffee table. The thud was soft, but it echoed in the silence. I did not snap, I said. I woke up. I opened the folder. I pulled out the first piece of paper. It was a printout of the email Frank had sent about the itinerary, the one with the dates and the costs. This trip, I said, looking around the room, making eye contact with every aunt and uncle. This family legacy trip. Who here knows what Frank said to me when he announced it? Silence. He sat at his dinner table, drank the wine I bought, and told me, We are taking the family to Europe. Without you and your kids, you will just slow us down. I saw Aunt Marla's eyebrows twitch. That is a lie, Sharon cried out. We never said that. We said it might be too much walking for the little ones. I have the timestamp of the conversation, I said. But that is not the point. The point is, you told me my children, your grandchildren, were a burden. You told me they didn't belong in your picture. So you retaliated, Frank snapped. You sought revenge. No, I said. I sought a refund. I pulled out the next document, the spreadsheet with the 5-year total. I held it up. The font was large enough for Uncle Jerry to see. $210,000, I said. A gasp went through the room. That is the amount of money Frank and Sharon have charged to my credit card in the last 5 years, I said. Not for emergencies, not for medical bills, for casinos, for electronics, for vacations I wasn't invited to, for the clothes Brielle is wearing right now. Brielle shifted uncomfortably, pulling her cardigan tighter. That is an exaggeration, Frank stammered. We share finances. It is complicated. It is not complicated, I said. It is theft. You treated me like a bank that didn't charge interest. You used my labor to fund a lifestyle you could not afford. And the moment I asked for basic respect for my children, you cut me out. But you kept the card. I turned to the room. This was never about Europe, I said, my voice rising just enough to fill the corners of the room. This was about my children being treated like baggage. This was about my son Leo asking me why he wasn't good enough. This was about my daughter being ignored because she doesn't fit the aesthetic. You are twisting everything, Brielle shouted, standing up. You are making us look like monsters. We love those kids. We just wanted one trip without the chaos. Yeah, Dustin added. We already told the kids they were going to get souvenirs. We promised them we would bring them back something nice. I turned on him. You promised them souvenirs, I asked. On whose money, Dustin? Were you going to buy those souvenirs with your debit card? Or were you going to put them on my Visa and let me pay for the gift you handed to my son? Dustin opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at Frank. Frank looked away. The room was deadly quiet. The jealous daughter narrative was unraveling, thread by expensive thread. She is lying, Sharon sobbed, doubling down. She is making this up to hurt us. Marla, please, tell her to stop. Aunt Marla stood up. She walked over to the coffee table. She didn't look at the spreadsheet. She looked at Brielle. I saw the video, Marla said. Brielle froze. What video? The one you posted on your private story, Marla said. The one you thought only your friends could see, but you forgot that my granddaughter follows you. Marla turned to the room. In the video, Marla said, her voice shaking with suppressed anger. Brielle was laughing. She was filming the dinner table. She zoomed in on Emery's face when Frank told her she wasn't invited, and she put a caption on it. Marla paused. She looked at her sister. Sharon. The caption said, "Finally got the checkbook to stay home. Eurosummer, here we come." The air left the room. Frank went pale. Sharon stopped crying instantly, her face freezing in a mask of shock. Brielle looked like she wanted to vomit. You recorded it? I asked Brielle softly. You laughed. It was a joke, Brielle whispered. It was just a joke. It wasn't a joke, Aunt Marla said. It was cruel. I didn't want to believe it. I thought maybe I misunderstood. But looking at these numbers, looking at how you are treating her. Marla turned her back on Frank and Sharon. She walked over to me and stood next to the chair. She didn't touch me, but the alignment was clear. She was no longer the judge. She was the defense. Don't twist this, Sharon, Marla said. You have been bleeding her dry. Frank stood up. He was desperate now. He was losing the audience. He needed to regain control. Fine, he shouted. So we borrowed some money. Families help each other. That doesn't give her the right to destroy my credit score. Do you know what she did? She froze everything. I can't even apply for a loan to fix the furnace. I reached into the folder for the final piece of paper, the one I had been saving. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A notification from Sarah Jenkins, my lawyer. Update: the fraud investigator has pulled the IP logs. It confirms the application came from the Maple Glen residence. We have enough to proceed. I looked at the notification, then I looked at Frank. You aren't trying to fix the furnace, Dad, I said. I slapped the paper onto the table. It was the Lending Club loan application. You were trying to take out $25,000 in my name, I said. 3 days ago, after I cut you off, you used my social security number. You used your email. You tried to commit identity theft against your own daughter to fund a trip to Italy. Frank's mouth opened, but no words came out. He looked at the paper as if it were radioactive. The room was no longer silent. It was buzzing with whispers. Identity theft, $25,000. That was a mistake. Frank stammered. I clicked the wrong box. I meant to put my name. You clicked the wrong box for the social security number. I asked. You accidentally typed 9 specific digits that belonged to me. I leaned forward. I was done. The trial was over. The verdict was in. I have already filed the affidavit with the police, I said. Sharon let out a scream. You called the police. I reported the fraud, I said. Whatever investigation happens next is up to the detectives, but here is where we stand. I looked at Frank, then Sharon, then Brielle, then Dustin. I am giving you a choice, I said, and it is the last choice you will ever get from me. Choice, Frank wheezed. He looked old. He looked defeated. Option 1, I said. You continue to lie, you continue to badmouth me, and I let the investigation run its full course. I hand over everything: the 5 years of statements, the casino withdrawals, the fake loan to the prosecutor. You will likely face felony charges. Sharon clutched her chest. Option 2, I said. You apologize, not to me, to Leo, to Maya, to Sam. You write them a letter, handwritten, apologizing for making them feel less than. You acknowledge that you were wrong, and you sign a legal agreement that my lawyer has drafted. I pulled a stapled document from the back of the folder. This agreement states that you will never ask me for money again, I said. It states that you will never attempt to use my identity again, and it states that if you violate these terms, the fraud affidavit gets reactivated immediately. I tossed the document onto the coffee table next to the evidence of their betrayal. You have 24 hours to decide, I said. Emery, Aunt Marla said softly, you are serious. I have never been more serious in my life, I said. I picked up my empty folder. I didn't wait for an answer. I didn't wait for them to cry or beg or scream. I turned and walked toward the door. "Emery, wait," Dustin called out. "You can't just leave like this." I stopped at the threshold. I looked back at the room full of people, my family, who were looking at me with a mixture of fear and newfound respect. "I am not leaving," I said. "I am escaping." I walked out of Aunt Marla's house and into the sunlight. I saw Gavin sitting in the car, the engine idling. He saw my face calm, resolved, victorious, and he unlocked the doors. I got in. "How did it go?" he asked. "The jury is out," I said, buckling my seatbelt. "But I think we won the case." My phone buzzed again. It was a text from Brielle. "I am deleting the post." I didn't reply. I just watched the house disappear in the rearview mirror. They wanted a public spectacle. They wanted to drag me through the mud. Instead, they had slipped in their own filth. The conference room of Jenkins and Associates smelled of lemon polish and impending litigation. It was a neutral ground, chosen specifically for its lack of emotional resonance. There were no family photos on the walls, no memories of Christmas dinners, no ghosts of the past to haunt the proceedings, just a long mahogany table, 6 leather chairs, and the icy hum of the air conditioning. I sat at the head of the table. Sarah Jenkins, my attorney, sat to my right. Her posture was impeccable, a silent wall of legal steel between me and the people walking through the door. My phone was face down on the table. My laptop was open. At 10 o'clock sharp, the heavy glass door opened. Frank walked in first. He was wearing a suit, but it looked slightly too large for him now, as if the stress of the last week had physically shrunk him. Sharon followed, clutching a handkerchief, her eyes darting around the room like a trapped bird. Brielle and Dustin brought up the rear. They didn't look like the confident influencers or successful business owners they pretended to be. They looked like children called to the principal's office. They sat on the opposite side of the table. The divide was physical and metaphorical. "Good morning," Sarah said. Her voice was professional, devoid of warmth. "Thank you for coming. We are here to finalize the terms of the separation of assets and to address the pending fraud investigation." Frank cleared his throat. He adjusted his tie. He tried to summon the patriarch, the man who commanded rooms, but the energy wasn't there. "This is ridiculous," Frank said, gesturing to the room. "We do not need lawyers. We need to talk like a family." "Emery, you are overreacting. You have taken a simple disagreement and turned it into a federal case. It is literally a federal case. Mr. Hernandez," Sarah noted dryly. "Identity theft across state lines falls under federal jurisdiction." "It was a mistake," Sharon wailed. He clicked the wrong box. "How many times do we have to say it? We are your parents. Emery, you are treating us like criminals." "I am treating you like defendants," I said. "Because that is what the evidence makes you." I looked at Brielle. She was staring at the table, refusing to meet my eyes. She knew what was coming. She knew the narrative had shifted. "You say I am overreacting," I said to Frank. "You say I misunderstood. You have spent the last week telling everyone who will listen that I am crazy, that I imagined the insult, that I abandoned you for no reason." "Because you did," Frank said, leaning forward. "You construed a comment about logistics into a personal attack." "I never said we didn't want the kids. I said traveling with them is difficult. You twisted my words." "Did I asked. I turned my laptop around. I pressed the spacebar. The video player was already queued up. The sound was turned up to maximum volume. On the screen, the scene from Sunday night played out in high definition. There was the candlelight. There was the roast beef. There was Brielle's hand holding the phone, panning across the table. And then, clear as a bell, Frank's voice filled the silent conference room. "We are taking the family to Europe. Without you and your kids, you will just slow us down." Then the camera zoomed in on my face, the shock, the hurt, and then Brielle's giggle from behind the camera. I let the video play until the end. I let the silence that followed hang in the air for a full 10 seconds. Frank's face was a shade of gray I had never seen before. He couldn't deny it. He couldn't gaslight me. His own voice, recorded by his own daughter, had just convicted him. That, I said, pointing to the screen, is not logistics, Dad. That is cruelty. And the caption Brielle added, finally got the checkbook to stay home. That is not a joke. That is a confession. Brielle shrank into her chair. I deleted it, she whispered. The internet is forever, Sarah said. And we saved a copy for the file. Frank slumped back. The fight seemed to drain out of him. He looked at the table, then at me. So what do you want? He asked. His voice was hollow. You want your money back, is that it? Fine. We will set up a payment plan. $20 a month, whatever. This is not about the money anymore, I said. Although, let us be clear. You do owe me $210,000. Sarah slid a document across the table. We have submitted the full dossier to the fraud department, Sarah said. The credit freeze is permanent. The new card numbers are issued and locked. The investigation into the lending club loan is active. Depending on how this meeting goes, Emery is prepared to either advocate for leniency or press for the maximum penalty. Sharon looked at me, her eyes wide with horror. You would send your father to jail. I would let my father face the consequences of his actions, I said. There is a difference. Sharon turned to Gavin, who was sitting quietly in the corner of the room, observing. Her face twisted into a snarl. This is you, she hissed. This is your doing. You have been whispering in her ear. You turned her against us. Emery was never like this. She was sweet. She was helpful. You made her hard. I slammed my hand onto the table. The sound cracked like a gunshot. Stop it, I said. My voice was low, but it commanded the room. Sharon flinched. Stop blaming my husband for the spine I grew, I said. Gavin didn't tell me to cut you off. Gavin begged me to see what you were doing to me years ago, and I ignored him because I wanted to believe you loved me. This is not Gavin. This is me. This is the daughter you used, finally deciding she is worth more than a credit limit. I took a breath. I looked at each of them. Here is the deal, I said. Sarah has drafted a specialized agreement. It is a no-contact order with a singular exception. I pushed the paper toward Frank. I am giving you one chance to fix the emotional damage. I said, not the financial damage. I know you can't pay me back. I don't expect you to. I am writing off the debt as the cost of my freedom. Frank looked at the paper. What is the exception? You apologize to the children, I said. To Leo, to Maya, to Sam. You go to my house, today, and you look them in the eye. You tell them that you were wrong to exclude them. You tell them that they are not a burden. You tell them that you love them, without adding a but or an if or a however or a... I leaned forward. You validate them, I said. And then, you leave. You respect our boundaries. You never ask for money again. You never talk about my finances again. If you can do that, we can keep a relationship. We can try to rebuild. It was a lifeline. It was more grace than they deserved. I was offering them a way to keep their grandchildren, to keep a connection to the family, simply by swallowing their pride for 5 minutes. Frank looked at the paper. He read the terms. Then he laughed. It was a short, bitter bark of a laugh. You want me to drive to your house, Frank said, and apologize to a 4-year-old because I went on a vacation. I want you to apologize for making him feel unwanted, I said. He is 4. Emery, Frank said, throwing his hands up. He doesn't remember what he had for breakfast. This is petty. You are humiliating me over nothing. I am the grandfather. I deserve respect. I am not going to grovel to children to satisfy your ego. I looked at him. I really looked at him. I saw the man I had idolized as a child. I saw the man I had spent my entire adult life trying to please. And I realized, with a sudden, crystal clarity, that he was incapable of seeing anyone else as a protagonist in their own life, to him. We were all just supporting characters in the Frank show. It is not my ego, Dad, I said softly. It is their heart. It is ridiculous, Frank spat. I refuse. If you want to have a relationship, you come to us. You apologize for this stunt. I looked at Sharon. Mom? Sharon looked at Frank. She looked at the terrified expression on Brielle's face. Then she looked down at her hands. Your father is right, she whispered. You are asking too much. I nodded. It was the answer I expected, but hearing it still felt like a final, severing cut. Okay, I said. I looked at Sarah. Give me the other document. Sarah handed me a thick file. It was the formal cease and desist, the restraining order application, and the final affidavit for the fraud investigation confirming I wanted to proceed with prosecution for the identity theft. I uncapped my pen. Then this is where it ends, I said. What are you doing? Dustin asked, panic rising in his voice. I am signing the no-contact agreement, I said, and I am authorizing Sarah to release the full evidence file to the district attorney. Emery, no, Sharon screamed. You can't. I gave you a choice, I said, signing my name with a steady hand. Emery Hernandez. You chose your pride over your grandchildren. Now, I am choosing my peace over your drama. I closed the folder. I stood up. Do not contact me, I said. Do not come to my house. Do not call my husband. Do not post about me on social media. If you do, Sarah will have you in court so fast your head will spin. And Frank. My father looked up. He looked small. He looked like a man who had bet the house and lost. Enjoy the memories of Europe, I said. I hope they keep you warm, because you are not getting anything else from me. I walked out of the conference room. I didn't look back. I heard Sharon sobbing. I heard Frank shouting at Sarah. I heard the sound of my old life crumbling behind closed doors. I walked out into the parking lot where the air was fresh and the sky was a limitless, brilliant blue. That evening, the house was quiet. But it was a good quiet. It was the quiet of a sanctuary. I made tacos. It was our new tradition. After dinner, I sat on the living room floor with the kids. I had bought a pack of construction paper, glitter glue, and markers. What are we making? Leo asked. We are making envelopes, I said. Leo stiffened. He remembered the blue envelopes. He remembered the feeling of being left out. Not those kind of envelopes, I said quickly. These are for us. We are going to write notes to each other. We are going to write down the things we love about being in this family. Leo looked at me. Like that I am star-shaped. Exactly like that, I said. We spent an hour cutting and pasting. Sam covered himself in glitter. Maya drew a picture of us on the beach in Puerto Rico. When we were done, we sat in a circle. Leo handed me a lopsided red envelope. On the front, in his careful, jagged handwriting, it said, "For Mom." I opened it. Inside, there was a single piece of yellow paper. Thank you for taking us to the warm place. Thank you for not leaving us behind. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. It was the only tear I had shed all day. I made one for everyone, Sam shouted, handing out green envelopes that were mostly just scribbles and glue. Maya handed one to Gavin. Gavin handed one to me. We sat there, exchanging these messy, beautiful, worthless pieces of paper that were worth more than every first-class ticket Frank had ever bought. We belong here, Leo said suddenly, looking at his pile of envelopes. What? I asked. At Grandma's? We didn't belong, Leo said. But here with the envelopes, we belong here. I reached out and pulled him into a hug. I pulled Maya in. I pulled Sam in. Gavin wrapped his arms around all of us. Yes, I whispered into Leo's hair. We belong here, and we aren't going anywhere. The house was safe. The bank accounts were secure. The phone was silent. And for the first time in my life, I knew exactly what I was worth. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It was a long road to get here, but I am finally free. I would love to know where you guys are tuning in from. So please drop a comment down below and let's get a conversation started. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more about people taking back their power, please make sure to subscribe to the channel Leona Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this video get recommended to more people who might need to hear it. Stay strong. And remember, never let anyone treat you like an option in your own life.